facility and transformation. It's a hot topic that you'll hear a lot about throughout the year. It's great to see so many faces in the room. I will not talk for far too long. I just wanted to say a warm welcome. To remind you of few housekeeping rules, please switch off your phones or put them on silent. There are no fire drills today, so if you hear fire drill, please follow me. I'll take you to safety, I do promise. And finally, this event is being recorded and will be shared with people at a later point. The only other thing I would like to ask of you as we go along with the event is to share your feedback. As you know, it is a brand new group. We do get a lot of ideas and recommendations, and they're always really useful. So please let us know what you think. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Darren, who is going to tell us a little bit more about Hexagon, who are the sponsor of today's event.
Thank you, Lena. I copy that. Good morning, all. I'm welcome to Hexagon's metrology facility. So I'm Darren Cook. I'm one of the area sales managers for Hexagon. So they kind of say a picture says 1,000 words. So I wanted to kind of show you a couple of sort of short videos, really, just to give you a glimpse of who Hexagon are, effectively. Let's push the right button. Oh yeah.
This is it. Able to speak. We live to connect with reality. Each day presents an opportunity to create unique moments. These quietly power the next moment, and the next, and the next. Our future. Paying attention to the everyday, seemingly ordinary, paves the way for the extraordinary. Every moment counts. The small things are the big things. We do not always see them, nor do they shout out loud, yet they shape our reality. We enable a better future by creating technology that powers meaningful moments, connecting the past, the present, the future. We are one Hexagon. Our passion is manufacturing an autonomous future.
So that's kind of an overview for us, really, from kind of quite a high level, really. Within Hexagon, we've got quite a few divisions. So I've also got if it works, a little video just to kind of give you a bit of a glimpse of the manufacturing side of it for us, which is a lot of what we do here at this facility. Let's try a bit more of a portfolio, but you can see, there's quite a lot of technology there, so it keeps me quite busy. But yeah, I kind of just want to finish off really, and yeah, obviously welcome, and yeah, if you get time, obviously come through to our workshop and we can kind of talk to you, show you a little bit about what we're doing here, and yeah, any questions, give us a shout really. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Darren. Again, I'm only coming in to say hello and invite Sara to come over and start off with today's event.
Thank you, Lena. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So let me just get myself orientated here. Right. Okay, so why this event? Okay, so our special interest group is business agility and transformation, and this has been formed because we really feel that we, as individual volunteers that have formed this group, we really want to help companies within STC thrive and flourish, and get their whole teams to be more agile and perform and achieve their goals. And we really feel that there's several areas that we can support on for this. So that's our motivation behind forming the special interest group. And we asked your opinion at the annual conference last year as to what you wanted our group to talk about and what your priorities were as a collective group. And without a shadow of a doubt, the loudest voice was about sustainability. So here we are, we listened, and we hope to deliver some interesting insights today. I think sustainability can be a bit of a buzzword sometimes, and can be quite tricky to navigate. There's a lot involved. There's seemingly a lot of people, especially SMEs, not sure where to start with it. And we hope to be able to give you some pointers and tips today as to how you can start to navigate your way through that, and some interesting information that hopefully inspire you to grow yourselves. So that's where we are. So yeah, so what I always like to start with is a good old definition. It always seems a good place to start when you're trying to talk about something. So I found this excellent quote from the Institute of Management Development, and they say that sustainability is a business approach to creating long-term value by taking into consideration how a given organisation operates in the ecological, social and economic environments. Okay, so we want to help you realise the value of sustainability. It isn't a buzzword that needs to be complied with. It's something that can bring value to your business. Okay, so that's the important part of what we're talking about today. If I can. Oops, I've gone too fast now. Trigger happy. Now you're all dizzy. Okay, so sustainability has sort of three main sections for me. It has environmental, economic and social sustainability. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what I understand about each of those. So environmental sustainability is probably the one that comes to the forefront of your mind when you think about sustainability. So what does it actually mean? So waste is a really important factor of environmental sustainability, and minimising or eliminating that waste. Okay, so it's about using less energy, perhaps using less water, using less resources. So your management of resources and being responsible about disposal of those resources. There's also a driver in the environmental sustainability about driving towards a circular economy, and I feel really passionate about this. It's about totally reusing the materials we have and we process and we consume them, but those that we don't consume, that waste, actually being able to break that down to its original components so that we can completely reuse those again in a process in whatever driver we want to use it in. So that for me is the goal, is to actually work towards a circular economy. So, but in the meantime, we can repurpose, we can reuse, and then ultimately reform and recycle. So there's quite a lot of advance going on at the moment in all different sectors. For example, in the plastics industry, there's quite a lot of scale-up work happening up in Teesside and Tyneside for the full recycling of all plastics. So that's quite exciting, so that we can actually start throwing in our recycling all the plastics and not and actually breaking those back down to its monomer form and reusing those in as the feedstock for the industry. And that is really exciting. So it is going to be possible. So I think we watch this space, but supporting that industry and not demonizing what we've already got and trying to move on to other areas is, I think, is key there as well. Carbon neutral. Okay, so this is another thing that's bandied around quite a lot. And I often hear actually people talk about zero carbon. Zero carbon, that's interesting, isn't it? So there is no such thing as zero carbon, okay? So the carbon cycle is a natural phenomenon that we need to celebrate. We really kind of need carbon, and we just need what we're talking about, and what's important is maintaining that balance of what is in the atmosphere and what is trapped in the ground in living things. Okay, so it's about being responsible and about what we're contributing and what we're throwing out into the atmosphere, and then that's contributing to things like global warming. So carbon neutral is, there's lots of things you can do. A lot of them are around things like less waste, so using less, being more responsible with your resources, but also maybe not having bonfires on your land and you know, burning paperwork and things like that, and you know, trying to be responsible, maybe not cutting down all the trees on your property to make room for a big car park, concrete car park, things like that. Just there's things that you can do and quick wins. Also maybe thinking about not just your carbon footprint, but your digital footprint. You know, do you really need, if you need to download that data and those images, do you really need the images at the massive size? Maybe you could just download the smaller image. Think about the space that you're taking up, because we all think, don't we, about, oh yeah, it's okay, we're paperless now, it's all on the cloud. And this cloud is this lovely, fluffy place where it's all beautiful and we all hug trees. Well, actually, it's a great big block of metal that's air conditioned and absolutely huge in volume. So digital footprint is also part of the whole environmental sustainability of things. So there's things that we can do as small businesses that can make a difference. And then responsible sourcing. So this can also, I'll talk in a minute about economic sustainability, but this can have a really big impact as well. Just thinking about the material options that you've got for your business. Now that can actually drive opportunities for you as a business. It's not just about ticking the box of being good to the environment, but actually there might be a benefit to you or something that actually makes your business more better quality, more efficient, or help you grow and develop and evolve your products. So just taking a moment to have a look at your supply chain as well. Where are you sourcing these materials from, and how are you supporting local, and how are you facilitating more distant supply chains? Yeah, there's a lot of benefit that can be achieved from that, not just monetary gain, but also I'll talk about the social gain of that as well. The way your brand is perceived, for example, would be impacted on that. Okay, so economic sustainability. For me, this is about efficiency. Okay, so it's about minimizing that resource. So really thinking about where you can not cut corners, that's not what I'm talking about, but where you can have a greater output, maintain quality, but perhaps you don't need to use that resource. For example, I don't know, maybe there's a step in your process where actually, I know you maybe don't need a pump running constantly, or you don't need you know, another element of a machine running constantly in the background. Maybe you can have less energy use. Maybe the water or the other raw materials, maybe the flow rate of those can be looked at, and the volume that you use can be looked at. So it's just about questioning things and analysing what you've got, and rather than just carrying on the same path, and doing so for the benefit of sustainability for environment, your work environment, and also the bottom line. So, and again, yes, creating effective ways of processes, the same principle really. You know, what do you really need running? Are the processes in place that are in place, are they still valid? You know, as you've evolved as a company, do you really need that control sequence step? Do you really need that particular form to be filled in that process? Just thinking a little bit and challenging yourselves all the time about your processes. And productivity, managing the output for the work done, maximising the output for the work done. So just, again, thinking, analysing, thinking differently about it, making connections before making decisions. I think that always helps you achieve those goals. Okay, social sustainability then. This is, to me, all about valuing people, okay? And it includes, for me, and this is a very brief overview, there's a lot more involvement, but just as an overview umbrella, it includes diversity. Now, diversity is much more than, you know, your gender or the colour of our skin. It's age, it's social, economic, it's the education you have, the experience you've got, your particular personality or preferences, your connections even. There's a whole breadth of skills and ideas that can be gained from having a wide diversity in your business. And this will help sustain your business and the way it impacts on the local environment, be it society as people or the literal natural world. It will have an impact, a positive impact on those as well as your business. It also gives you a depth of understanding and identifying opportunities. And isn't that what you need to make your business grow? Again, it's about empowerment, realising the potential to find solutions. And that I've already talked about community engagement. So all the things you do for sustainability can have a positive contribution to your brand image and impact. And well-being, you know, if people are healthy and happy and, you know, they're much more likely to be engaged and helping you progress and survive and thrive in your goals. So that just gives you a very brief overview of sustainability as I see it. I want now to just introduce the speakers for today, because we've got some excellent speakers who have been very kind to offer up their time today. I just want each of us to just give us 60-second or less overview, just literally your name, your background and experience, and company and what the company does. So I'll go first. So I am Sara Penrose. I'm a chartered chemical engineer, and my background is in optimizing processes, in very often machines and processes, ERP systems, that sort of thing, in project management and managing multidisciplinary teams. But I also have now run my own business. I run my own business doing training and consultancy. And my passion is realising and optimising the value of people. Okay, so we do that by focusing on business objectives of quality, efficiency and growth. And we achieve those by developing people's abilities in critical thinking, lateral thinking and problem solving. So that's me. Could I please ask Emma to just to give a very, very quick, just less than 60 seconds, please.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see your faces. That's great, isn't it, being back together? I love it rather than being online.
Yes.
So I'm Emma Armstrong. I am Group Commercial and Sustainable Electronics Director from Intutech. My background is sales. I am a new business animal by heart, and there's no point ever pretending I'm otherwise. My responsibility in Intutech is really to take care of the front end. So I make sure that customers have a fantastic experience. I also make sure that we, as a marketing team, lead our credibility and authority in what we do. And we have a number of different pillars to our business, one being smart HMI. We've worked on that for a number of years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. One being highly recyclable membrane keypads, and then my key focus area, the reason I'm here to talk to you today is about the sustainable electronics. I've been with the business for the last 14 years. Really good company to work for. I would say that, of course, on the board. But we really encourage our people. I love what you were talking about in terms of the diversity and the culture. We take people in and we put them on a path for development. Wherever they want to go, if we can facilitate that, we will. And it's more about, as well, us allowing for 3 core focus groups made up of multiple disciplines throughout the business. The directors keep our noses out, and we allow those people to develop to help to improve our culture, our processes, how we communicate with each other, how we communicate with the outside world. And we really provide the opportunities to take on board what our employees think and feel. The challenge really, I think, is to try and make the business a really good place to work. And that means lots of different things to different people. So, you know, we try and embrace how other people feel, and I hope I facilitate that. So
Thank you very much.
And more about me in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. That's brilliant. Aaron, would you mind just a quick introduction to yourself? 60 seconds or less.
Aaron Mackenzie. I'm Chief People Officer for Haynes Watts, which is a mid-tier accountancy firm. That sounds boring. As soon as you say accountancy firm, it's not. It's a very exciting role. And it's exciting because my job is to build a thriving culture at Haynes Watts. My background is actually HR from the very start. So back in the late 80s, I started at Fujitsu, and I've worked in about 5 different sectors, I suppose. In fact, Haynes Watts will be my 6th sector. So I've got a broad understanding of different cultures across different sectors.
Thank you very much. John Henderson, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, good morning. I'm John Henderson. I'm co-founder and director of Sara Penrose Limited. So my background is 25 years in supply chain. So that time spent in what we call fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG, retail, also electronics and pharmaceuticals. So started on the traffic desk as a planner, and my last position was commercial director for a company called Kalina, which is a big provider of logistics in the food and drink sector. So in that time, I also spent 2 years in behavioural change consultancy, working for the Department for Transport and Transport for London, which was focused on encouraging sustainable freight transport policy, working with hauliers to move things forward in terms of that area. So if anyone's familiar with the Freight Operator Recognition Scheme for Transport for London, that was some of the work I did on the original tender document for that piece. Echoing some of Sara's comments, I'm very passionate about maximising the capability of people and businesses. I think when we focus on sort of the 3 areas we talked about, quality, efficiency and growth, and that's really about more satisfied customers, better use of resources and maximising the future success of the business. So yeah, that's me. So fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, John. Richard Collins, please.
Yes, good morning everyone. I'm Richard Collins, and I am the founder of the only accreditation body for environmental and social responsibility. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We support that with consultation around sustainability, training and social impact report writing, because the most important thing we can do as businesses is demonstrate the impact that we're making, both in terms of commercial benefits, but also social benefits as well. So I'll be rounding up today. I'm also sitting with Sara as part of the BAT panel. We are the BAT people, aren't we?
We are the
Yeah,
BAT
yeah,
people. We just need
Sorry.
a car now. We need a BAT car.
a searchlight, really, don't we? So we can-
Yeah.
so I'll be.
Yes.
It
We'll
won't
come
do
to you.
We'll use solar or something. But I'll be tail ending today's debate and discussion. So I'll be coming back to talk a bit later on. So
Thank you very much, Richard. That's lovely. Well, that's all of us. And so I will finish on that note. Hello from all of us and welcome to all of you. Thank you for being with us today, both here physically and online as well. So great. I shall hand over now to Emma, who will take the next section. Have you been shown how to use this?
Well, I hope
Until I destroy
I
it.
hope I would be able to figure it out.
Yes.
But
A tech company. Stranger things have happened, so you never know. Right, okay. Again, I'll say good morning, everybody. What were we just saying? So who are into tech? Well, we are innovators in sustainable electronics. We've actually had 25 years really pushing the boundaries in flexible electronics. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment and show you, actually. I brought some show and tell for once. So we have the UK Technology Centre. We're based in Kettering, and our developments in flexible electronics have allowed us to basically gain a lot of IP and inherent knowledge, both in the processes and the way in which we manufacture. We have a focused approach on shifting the paradigms for circularity in electronics. So 2 numbers here, 35 years, 25 years. Essentially, we were a part of a company called C&K Switches back in the 80s. They were discrete switch and safety switch manufacturers. And at that time, flexi circuits, membrane technology was the technology of the future, and they wanted a piece of that pie. So they set up a design and manufacturing facility for delivering that technology. And then they were bought out in 1999 by the ITT group. Our MD, R&D director, had invested significantly, both in terms of money, time, resources, to develop our capabilities, and made a decision that they didn't want to let it go. So we did an MBO and became into tech. Over the past 25 years, we've kind of worked on the capabilities of pushing the boundaries. Do people understand what I mean when I talk about flexible electronics? Okay, that's a decent start. Essentially, it's taking what is traditionally hard substrate FR4. We do produce these for customers that have a need, but essentially it's about reviewing opportunities, substrates and materials to be able to create flexible opportunities. And that allows us, as you can see in the bottom right hand corner there, to be able to utilize a lot of all of the real estate essentially inside an assembly to create things that have shape, they weigh less, and we can put an awful lot of functionality in a really small space. So a lot of what we've worked on over the years is the development and pushing the boundaries for what we can deliver. So down to 0.1 track and gap with silvers. We work with additive processes. So essentially where you have either a PCBA or polyamide material that's copper clad, that's an etching process. And you know, it's all clad. You basically identify on the board or the substrate where you want your circuit. Everything else is etched away. Some of it is recoverable, but essentially it's very expensive both in terms of money and expensive in terms of energy to deliver. What we have done for 35 years, so it's not new, is an additive process in flexible electronics. So essentially what we do is we place a carbon seed. We put the conductive inks, conductive silvers, only where it's required. The process itself is significantly less in its energy and obviously significantly less wastage. And And because of the behavioural differences between coppers and silvers, all of our development has been focused around what can be achieved using silvers, because it's a completely different process. So as I say, you know, 0.1 tracking gap, being able to place significantly smaller components than was ever possible 10, 15 years ago on a silver substrate. But it allows us to be able to take innovative opportunity to our customers that saves money, that actually is, you know, saves energy, and that utilizes, as I say, a lot more real estate. They can have shape, form, something that's continually moving, etc. So that's been our core for all of that time. Funnily enough, I said earlier on I was a new business animal. That's not what brought me to Intertech 14 years ago. I know some of it's quite sexy, but that really wasn't it. So what did is, because when I met with the MD and the R&D director, I had this moment of, oh my goodness, I can make a fortune here, because I just saw the opportunity with this significant USP for sustainability in electronics. They really were looking to inspire change, positively contribute to all the things that we now are really well versed in. And we do that by providing materials, design models, processes to deliver these assemblies that can be fully unzipped at the end of their life. We developed both the reuse technology, which I'll show you in a second, and the recycle, which is the closed loop system. And that's why I joined. I joined because I could see a massive opportunity for me in a company that was really forward thinking. So I'll touch a little bit on what does sustainability really mean. Like you, Sara, you know, the quote was very, very relevant for me. I've kind of put here what it means to me personally, and it's really about fulfilling the needs of current generations without compromising on the needs of future generations. I've got children of all ages, 23, 18, 5, and I want them to be able to experience all of the, you know, the things that I get to experience. Technology is improving, technology is growing. I want them to be able to afford it for a start, as we move forwards. And so, you know, all of the things that we're starting to talk about as a world, stop the pollution, earth, air and water table, stop depleting resources, you know, that they're finite, they're going to run out. The reduction of energy and water usage, and there's many ways in which we can do that, both in manufacturing processes and as Sara was saying, you know, if you're not in the room, turn the lights off, do whatever is necessary to be able to positively contribute and reduce energy and wastage, protect the health of human beings. So, you know, not just because of the devastation and the toxins that are leaching into the earth and the air and the water table, but in the manufacturing processes, in the mining processes, you see now these horrific scenes online of the children that are mining for the cobalt, as for instance, that are covered in chemicals, that are dying every day. And, you know, unfortunately, for years, we've been a little bit like the three monkeys, you know, see no, hear no, speak no evil. And that's coming to the fore, and people are thinking about it an awful lot more and starting to take some responsibility for ourselves and how we deliver product in the future. Protecting living organisms. Again, you know, the trees, the plants, the animals, the marine life, we're starting to see what affects the way that we've been choosing to live and the way that we've allowed ourselves to fall into the current way of living and what is acceptable, which is clearly not acceptable, and that the water holes are drying up, so the animals are dying and so on and so forth. But I put here, you know, about the insects. You guys, like me, when you were driving on a journey in your car, somebody else's car 20 years ago, how many insects were dead on your windscreen by the time you got to the end? You know, please think about next time you drive on to wherever, how many insects are dead on your windscreen now? 75% of the insects in the last 15 years, all gone. In a couple of decades, 40% will be extinct altogether. And 1/3 of the food crops around the world rely on insect pollinators to be able to have it. That's 1 in every 3 bites of every fruit and vegetable that you have relies on moths, beetles, bees, etc. And they're not going to exist. It's things that, you know, we need to be thinking about. Barriers, always barriers, especially for businesses that are, you know, small businesses, SMEs. Big businesses have the challenges as well, of course, because in some cases we're talking on a much larger scale here, but the cost to implement and the cost to change, but more so like the lack of understanding. What can I change? How can I change it? People are afraid to admit that they perhaps maybe don't understand what they can do, what they can achieve, what sustainability means. And you shouldn't be afraid to say that, because if we're not honest with each other and say, actually, you know, I need some help and some guidance, then we're never going to move forwards. Sometimes it's really hard. It's not feasible. You know, how many staff do you have to be able to review your processes or review your supply chain or look at what you can do internally? You know, some of these barriers we've experienced ourselves. We've invested significantly over the past couple of years. We've now all got fully electric vehicles. We have EV schemes for our employees. We allow them to charge for free. We've put all the chargers in so that people can get that. We've put IR heating in and reduced the significant amount of energy we're using to heat the facilities. Solar panels, you know, we've gone paperless, but at the same time we have a really strict rule, like you were saying, Sara. You know, these data centers, hideous amounts of energy, so we're only allowed to keep emails for a certain amount of time, and then it has to be, you know, put in a particular box called delete, you know, and it's just trying to tackle the things that we can one at a time, and doing the things that we can, and try not to resist it, because 20 years ago we all felt that about health and safety, right? Do I really have to? I'll do it because I have to conform. And now we know that the legislation is going to become such that we have no choice. So to be able to take the opportunity over, you know, the next few years to review and implement whatever is possible for ourselves in our companies, whether that's a company of 1 or 1 million. It is a fantastic change, and that's all I think the rest of the world can ask of each other. So that's obviously the broader spectrum, but what do we do? How do we help? What we do is electronics. Ta-da! So we help to take an approach by starting at the design phase. Everything that we do, we design for sustainability. There are a lot of materials in existence at the moment, so we can reuse existing materials where needed. For instance, you know, we can utilize FR4 substrate, take everything off it, reuse the FR4 substrate, it goes straight back into the production line. But of course, where possible, we want to remove hideous materials from the supply chain eventually. You know, FR4 specifically, the processes, the chemicals, the wastage of the water in the manufacture of the fiberglass in the first place. And then when it comes to the recycle, it's shredded, burnt. We've tried to do all sorts of things with it, crush it up, put it in the roads. It completely obliterates tires. So they decided very quickly that wasn't a good idea. And so, you know, it's all about working with our customers, understand the product, review what's possible, what degree to which we can achieve recyclability, and implementing that meets the needs of the specification and the end product. And in doing so, you know, change the we cost chain into a value cost chain. The two ends of the spectrum, then we have reuse and recycle, and it's the closed loop system. So reuse, it's a patented technology. It is proprietary design techniques, because of course we have to design the pads and the circuit to be able to be disassembled at the end of its life. And it's our formula essentially for the conductive adhesives, inks, interlayer adhesives, and epoxy coatings. It uses the 35 years that we've built on flexible electronics processes, so it's nothing new, it's nothing different. And there is a whole library of materials that are available as the alternate solutions. So again, as I say, if a lot of people utilize FR4 because it's been the tech since the 70s, and few of those need it for the flammability properties, as a for instance, you know. So don't use it. Let's rigidize it with a different material that can be recycled, and perhaps maybe was even recycled in the first place, so we're using recycled material. The recycle process is that disassembly process. So essentially, at the end of a product's life, that might be 1 year, 3 years, 7 years, 12 years, it can come back to the collection facility, either within a recycling facility or within an OEM specifically, which is kind of a number of the businesses we're talking to at the moment, large OEMs, and they can, with hot water, so no chemicals, no harmful additives, hot water and mechanical force, you know, minimum 5-6 newtons of mechanical force whilst submerged, these things aren't going to fall apart. It's no different to the you know, the conductive adhesives that you are experiencing today in your flexible electronics. These guys withstand an awful lot. So it has to go through a specific process, but essentially we can take everything back to its constituent parts. That means that you have the opportunity to do a number of things. So you can wash the components and put them back into the supply chain. You can wash the components, you can put them straight back into your manufacturing line, or they can go on to be collected as a group of components that can then be recycled properly. But ultimately, you know, it gives the opportunity for that circularity. And at the moment, there's a lot of people jumping on this bandwagon now, trying to identify solutions of how to do it. Why? Supply chain issues. People can't get high value components. There are people around the world, Tesla being one famously, buying white goods, trying to take off high value chips in order to be able to continue to manufacture. The problem is that a lot of those chips then, they can't actually understand the level of viability in the component because it's gone through an awful amount of stress. What they have to do is heat up the substrate to, you know, 800 degrees in order to try and disassemble the solder from the substrate material to get that component. Very few components can withstand that amount of heat stress. What we do is providing clean, uncontaminated components back that haven't undergone any such stress. They can withstand the temperature or the heat that is required to go through the process. So it's viable, clean, undamaged components. The reason, of course, we're doing it, there are a number of key issues. E-waste is a biggie, and people are aware of the things I'm going to show here, really, but I wanted to put some detail to it, to put some relativity to it. So PCBs generally achieve somewhere between 3 and 5% recyclability. In 2021, I should update this really to 2022, now it's finished, but 2021, the 57.4 million metric tons globally of e-waste was generated. And just under 17% was documented and recycled around the world. And I've put recycled there in red because recycled means shredded and buried or burnt. Of course, therefore, you've got 83% that we, again, 3 monkeys, sends to countries where, you know, it shouldn't be destined for. And again, you see images of the people that are working to, you know, strip wires and try and gain back some precious materials. And that stuff is hideous, you know. Children have been known to have cardiovascular issues. It causes liver damage when your cadmium, mercury and lead leach into the tables of the earth and the water. Sperm damage, you know, there's all sorts of horrendous things, but more so we shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And actually we don't need to. it was estimated by the GEC and a number of sources that $60 billion of recoverable material was wasted in 2021. The high value components, the gold, the silvers, and the precious, resources were just thrown away, and that's higher than the GDP of some countries. What's the solution? Bury it or burn it. If we change just 2.5% of that volume in 2021, we save over 25 kilotons of e-waste going to landfill. Oops, I apologise, I'm being special. There we go. Carbon. I'm not going to say carbon zero. Okay. So PCBA is just the hard substrate stuff. We're talking, it's estimated at 29 billion tons of CO2 for that 2021 production figure. But to put some relativity to that, as I've said here, 81% of the energy a laptop uses throughout its entire lifetime is consumed during its manufacture. And we need to be addressing those processes, and we need to be looking at how we reduce the energy within those processes. And clearly it's far bigger, than looking at merely the electronics, because we've got a responsibility to address every element. And the larger manufacturers, of course, are starting to work on that. But again, if we look at reuse on those processes, we can save 2.4 billion tons of CO2 just by changing that 2.5% to a reuse PCBA in the process. The recycle side then, when we disassemble versus the current recycling method, it's an energy reduction process versus process of 73%. Circular economy, and this is why, as I say, there are a number of funds out there now trying to do what we have done for the last 15 years. It's taking us that amount of time to really get into the position. Yes, we have the patents for the technology, but really get into the position where we are extremely confident and have validated the delivery of the replication of multiple assemblies. And also the desire, right? The desire has been a challenge, because when I came in and I was all whooping and excited about this wonderful USP, nobody cared. Everybody cares now, or at least say they do. And what I'm really pleased to hear is that, the vast majority really now do mean it. But the circular economy is what's provoking other businesses and funds to try and address the sustainability in electronics. One key fact here is 70% of the CO2 within a PCBA actually comes from the components themselves during their manufacture and their mining, and then of course we're chucking those away as well at the end of the day. But they're designed for 20-25 years of life when you look at the data sheets of these components, and they're used on average for 4.5 years or less. It's crazy. An iPhone requires 1,000 times its own weight in material to manufacture, and just getting an ounce of gold out of the earth creates over 90 million tons of earth waste. That hole's just going to get bigger and bigger, and at the same time yields have declined 23% in the last 6 years, even without the government changing the pensionable age. Before I draw my pension, and I am in my mid-40s, but before I draw my pension, there isn't going to be any gold or many other resources, because we'll have used it up. And when I talked earlier on about my 5-year-old having affordable technology and technology that's going to help our future generations to move forward, where's it going to come from? We won't have any. They're not finite. I just cannot express to people enough the opportunity that we have to be able to provide back the clean, undamaged components that can be reused. And there is a second life market now for components, because people are desperate, not just the high value components, the large scale contract manufacturers that are approaching us to say, well, actually, you know, the 0.1% LED that we would consider a few years ago not reusing in second life, well, they took my line down last week and I couldn't produce my 5 million PCBAs for my very, you know, my number one customer. And so they are as valuable, but there are a lot of people now that are starting to need componentry and are very desperate to get them for second life. Current recycling processes, I did speak a little bit about, you know, it's impossible at the moment to be able to recycle an electronics assembly. The shredding processes, it goes through a loop that allows for the glass and the plastics and the metals and the things that have a scrap value to be reclaimed, and everything else just goes through the shredder. There are companies as well at the moment that are looking at ways and means of replacing and replicating materials such as the fiberglass. There's one here that I've named specifically, Jiva. Biodegradable board. It has its challenges in that if it gets wet, hot, it starts to bend, so it doesn't give you the right properties, but it's great for some applications, and it is within our suite of materials that we offer for those applications. But essentially you get to the end of it and you still have your components attached to your circuit, so that still goes through exactly the same process. So it's really important that you look at, you know, it has to be a suite. We have to manufacture it with the reuse conductive adhesives so that it can be disassembled at the end of its life. But unfortunately, the reason why there is only 17% recycled these days is because the cost to recycle outweighs the gain. And a lot of people that we talk to are saying, oh, but hang on a minute, because if I'm reusing that, then when it comes back to my BOM, it's free. That's right, it is. And that's why the contract manufacturers are really interested, right? Because their business model, that is where they make their money, the bill of materials, the sourcing of a significant quantity that then allows them to be able to sell on those components at a higher value in an assembly. So when they're free, you know, it's a big value for them. And I've talked about this already, really, but it's the difference in the process technology. So we manufacture with the reuse solution on the board, on the circuit, because of course, you know, in this particular case, it has a rear adhesive. So on the circuit, just like we have now today, there's various coding or identifiers etched within the circuits of anything. And within that, there will be a display marking that shows that it's a reuse assembly, so that the designated collection facilities, when they take those back in, they know which goes in which bin. And that the process, as I say, is 73% less energy to recycle. And when they're separated and washed, you've got the number of different opportunities as what to do with those components and materials. I wanted to show you a quick case study, which is actually this board. This company are commercial lighting, essentially. So they are a large company throughout Europe, and we're working with the UK arm, or did so for the first part of this project. A really simple board, essentially. It was FR4, LEDs, resistor, and a connector. We did the calculations, and trust me, we have worked for years on this calculation model, and it's really challenging because you can't search for and easily gain the CO2 effects of multiple different materials or processes. You know, it's taken a very long time for us to establish this, and we've worked with Carbon Trust, we've worked with Dell looking at their FR4 and many other sources, but we've developed the model which, you know, be fair, there is a level of tolerance because it's difficult to get the absolute truth out of people as to what's involved, just because they don't measure it properly. But when we do the analysis, one versus the other in terms of the construction, you can see there the figures for the first time of manufacture, how much carbon is in each one of these when it's made with its FR4 substrate versus when we've actually replicated that with recycled aluminium. So it's recycled aluminium in this case, specifically because heat dissipation, because it was the right substrate for the job. But in doing so, the process to manufacture, we've saved 62.5% of the carbon in the delivery of each of their parts. And of course, when that then comes back, second life, goes through the recycle process, manufactured again, it only is 0.001 of CO2 in its manufacture, so 99.9 reoccurring, essentially. 1 million of their products save them 314 tonnes. They make several million a year, but I wanted to show it in a, in a million. Maybe they might have a bad year, I don't know, hope not. And a lot of people, to put that into some perspective, do still like to talk in trees. So it's 11,813 mature trees, so 100 years plus mature trees equivalent. What attracts them, of course, as well as being able to market the fact that they have fully recyclable electronics and their product line, which they're already charging a premium for. On that million boards, there's of course a scrap value for the aluminium, and we had looked at it on the basis that maybe just 10% of their LEDs were valid to reuse, because it's been out in the field for 10 years and they only wanted to use 10%. But that gives a value back per million, and you can see there 5.4 pence per board back to them versus the WE charges that they pay today for it to be collected and shredded. And that's it, essentially. This is what we do, and I appreciate that the opportunity for me as well, being here with you guys today, is to say that, I know there's a lot of challenges, especially with SMEs, smaller businesses, and again, the barriers, the cost to deliver this. To put some perspective to that, we talk around 8 to 10% is the on cost for implementation, cost of manufacture, one versus the other when it's an FR4 substrate being replicated. But of course, what you then save in terms of processes, what you then gain at the back end in the value chain, and savings in the cost in the long run. We're hoping that people will at least be cost neutral. But when we're talking one type of flexi substrate to another type of flexi substrate, the on cost is practically zero. So it's a free win. From a perspective, I think, of being able to get things for very little cost, why wouldn't you? But that's your choice, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for the mic.
Grab all of my wares without.
It's quite a pack of electronics.
It is.
We have to stand here behind me. Okay, right. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Aaron Mackenzie from, I'm hoping this is working. How about this?
You can deliver mine again if you like.
Am I going backwards? I have no idea where I'm going. Got it. Good morning again. So I'm going to follow on with Emma's presentation to talk about how you ignite this piece around corporate social responsibility in an organisation from a people perspective. How do you get that engagement, that commitment, that passion in supporting what is known as the CSR agenda? And I don't like the acronym CSR very much because of the letter C. The letter C stands for the corporate social responsibility element of that. And the reason why I don't like it is the same reason, really, as to when people call things like corporate culture. Culture and social responsibility actually starts from individuals and people. And that word corporate somehow detracts from it. And I want to sort of bring that to life a little bit more with a few personal stories. In my bio, I actually talked about my wee little cottage in the Highlands of Scotland, and this is it. It's that little place there. This was last Christmas. I'm hoping you think that's quite picturesque and quite sort of inspiring in some ways. So we've got a little dusting of snow there, about 2 centimetres. But actually, this picture here worries me a little bit, and this is why. This was the snow depth 20 years ago at my wee little cottage. So this is the first Christmas that we spent at this cottage. We used to get 1.5 meters of snow every Christmas or by Christmas, and that used to stay in the mountains until March. Now we get a couple of centimetres at Christmas, and the reason for this big change in the Highlands of Scotland is not that it's not getting cold, because we had a minus 16, 17 last year, but the variability of the climate is actually going so sort of swinging from sort of a mild 5 degrees, 6 degrees, say, back down to minus 10 when we'll get some snow, and then of course it all melts. So that sort of pile of 1.5 meters now might be a couple of centimeters, and then we lose it all. We have to wait a few more days, and it might snow again and get a few more centimeters, and then it goes. So something has happened, something has changed. The ski centre up the road is really trying to deal with this situation, but actually 20 years difference. This is what I'm personally experiencing at my home in Scotland. I want to share a second story with you. So I am part of the LGBTQ community. I've been in the workplace a bit longer than Emma. I started in the 80s, back end of the 80s. And at that time, I worked at Fujitsu. I think I mentioned it in my opening sort of introduction. And there at Fujitsu, I used to work in the sales team. I used to sell mainframes and PCs. I did this for 18 months because I was very rubbish at it and realised I was far better in HR. But in that sales team, which was an all-guys team, I was actually excluded from drinks on the Thursday night, you know, all the boys down the pub type thing. When I challenged the guys on it, I said, well, we didn't think you'd like the evening with us. You know, I was all fully out. So it's kind of, I had that sense of exclusion, if you like. In the 2000s, one of the 4 banks that I worked for, I was actually called the F word. I'm not going to name the bank, but I did have that experience. I had it actually twice. So it was not a very welcoming environment. In the 2010s, I had to go, I didn't have to, but I went and worked in Asia and the Middle East. I had to go back into the closet because I wasn't safe if I was out and open. But here I am in the 2020s, and I don't think anyone in this room is going to throw a bun at me. So I feel quite comfortable. And I am now talking about LGBTQ rights. So we've moved on a lot. But I don't know if you saw in the press the other day, Sandy Toksvig was talking about how the Church of England and being able to marry in church. She said, I really wish that I don't have to talk about it, because actually you just wished that it was just part of your life. So every now and then I do have to stand up and sort of put my hand up and do some talk, but it's a lot less frequent than I used to, which is great. That story is there to inspire and sort of that we can make a difference. It's not all hopeless. My last personal story, and then I'll shut up about myself. These are my 2 dogs. Breeze on the right, Molly on the left. Breeze was from a Welsh puppy farm, and she was a rescue dog, therefore she was rescued from that. And we brought her into our lives. She comes via a rescue company called the Children Dog Rescue, and Molly also then on the left there. She too comes from that. She was a street dog from Romania, and I work very closely with the Children Dog Rescue in terms of give as you earn, from salary at work, through volunteering and so on. And I share that because
that too is an important part of the CSR agenda, and that's what I'm now about to make the connection. Why did I share all those personal stories? The reason being is that is the starting point for getting that commitment to CSR, that social responsibility story in the organisations that you work for. So I've got some stories, you have some stories, your colleagues have some stories, and sharing those stories in the way that Emma did in her session about worrying about the future of her children, it actually personalises and ignites the enthusiasm, the passion and the commitment for what you do within the CSR. At Haynes Watts, we actually structure up the sustainability conversation, if you like, around environment. So I shared my story about snow depth in the Highlands. We talk about community. I shared my sort of connection to the LGBTQ community and how important that is for me. And then I talked about the charitable aspects of my 2 dear dogs on philanthropy. I haven't shared anything on workplace. I thought 3 stories. That was quite enough. But that's how we structure the way that we think, and we structure our work and efforts for building out our CSR commitment, if you like, through that structure. Why is that important? And the original brief for this presentation was how do you connect CSR to culture in an organisation? And any HR director, chief people officer, worth their salt will hopefully have a strategy that looks a bit like this. And that's all that people's strategy should be about. What you're trying to do is build a thriving culture in the organisation. And the way that you do that is you try to drive up the engagement or commitment of colleagues to the work that they do on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're trying to build a level of happiness in the organisation. And that isn't about being like this all the time. You can't be happy like to that level, but actually when you step back and reflect, think actually, yeah, I am enjoying this. That is really critical. And you can't do one without the other. So if you had high levels of engagement, and you might have seen this through the pandemic, where people really put all of their effort to keep their organizations afloat, that is good. But if you're not happy, you'll end up in a burnt out situation. And that's because happiness is your fuel to top up your engagement levels. You can't have one without the other. Equally, you can't have a whole load of happy people, happy fools as we call them, because actually if you haven't got that commitment to the job, all that happens is that they become unproductive. So many of us in HR land use that dimension to structure people's strategy. And I guess the question then is, well, where does corporate social responsibility actually sit within that? And the answer is plates. No, the true answer is that you've got about a dozen things that you need to drive at any one point in time. So you've got to talk about leadership, you've got to talk about career growth, you've got to talk about pay, you've got to talk about learning, you've got to talk about the work environment that you work in. So there's about a dozen of those different levers, different plates that you spin to drive up both engagement and happiness and get to that point of thriving culture. And actually, in doing that, one of the most important is actually around having values and purpose in the organisation. And let me show you what I mean by that. Before Haynes Watts, I worked for a private bank called C. Hoare & Co. They were not the bank that used the F word, by the way, just so everyone knows. We had a purpose that we built with the board and the executive team, simply of good bankers, good citizens. And the reason why we had that purpose is because you could interpret it in 2 different ways. One, the word good
is actually about we're pretty good at what we do in terms of our job. But actually, the word good has an angelic quality to it as well. And so we wanted to use the word good. We could have said awesome bankers, awesome citizens, but it just wouldn't have been us. And it actually doesn't have that quality that we've got. A core value, and one of our 4 values as an organisation there was social responsibility. So we actually called it out and actually had a very clear purpose that connected back to the idea of social responsibility in that case. And actually getting that out there and talked about right up front is really important in terms of setting the scene with colleagues. So I'm coming to the end. I guess what I'm saying through these few words is start with your personal stories, emotionally engage, because if you can get the engagement and make it feel that it matters to people, then actually what you can then move up to is start to build that plan. And you build the plan on the 4 structures as how I would do it. You might have a different view, but those 4 structures, those 4 pillars of environment, community, and the other 2, that is how you build the interventions. And then finally, communicate through having a strong purpose and a strong set of values that actually allows you to talk about it as a corporation, and effectively you're bringing in that wretched acronym CSR, the corporate piece of social responsibility. So that's how I've done it. I'm happy to continue to talk about this afterwards, but I was going to conclude at that point. Thank you.
Great. If we can invite John over to the next thing.
Good morning. Okay. Perfect. I was thinking that was going to go wrong, but it didn't, so that's a good start. Fantastic. Okay. So just to be clear, I'm not actually doing a presentation on recycling humans. In case that wasn't clear from the title page this morning. So I'm really pleased to be here today. Lovely day, which is fantastic. Beautiful weather, whether that's to do with the Northamptonshire climate or whether the fact that Fulham have got to the 5th round of the FA Cup this morning, I don't know, but it's bright sunshine, so we'll take it anyway. That's fantastic. So good. Okay. So just sort of start things off. I think really what I want to talk about today is to try and understand where the skill set sits, what sorts of questions we have around skills to do with sustainability. And I think here's a sort of some typical reactions to sustainability that we hear, sort of things we hear. So it's crept up, it's been dumped. And what I mean by it's been dumped is that somebody, Sally, for example, is looking after fleet, sustainability, operations, purchasing, etc. It's kind of crept up, and it's not necessarily integrated in the sense that it's something whereby times have changed, things have moved forward, and sometimes the business is trying to desperately fit it into the rest of the business of the ways of work, and that obviously causes us challenges. And I think one of the things you hear a lot of the time is initiative after initiative, lots of things coming forward. It's not easy to see what to focus on. It's very hard to bring in a continuous improvement mentality, which is small incremental steps, which ultimately is a better way of improving. And you know, I think it can be very confusing, the advice and the information given, and where to start, etc. And the idea is expensive. I think we talked about this before, and this is an observation. This isn't necessarily my opinion, but it's some of the things that have come forward in terms of what that means. So I think I'll re-engineer the whole business, and we're in this sector, this is what we do, and you know, there's no way we can incorporate that piece going forward. But I think history tells us that lots of businesses have moved forward rapidly from what they used to do to what they do now. And then onto the piece of we don't have the skills, which is sort of essentially where I'm focusing quite a bit of my time today. So tripped over that, would have been fun, wouldn't it? Okay, so this week I attended a local skills improvement plan, a meeting in Northampton, and one of the things that came out of it was a big uptake in demand for decarbonisation skills. What are they? Exactly. What are decarbonisation skills? Apparently it came up in the feedback as a big demand. So if anyone in this room is good with decarbonisation skills, anyone's got GCSE in that or anything like that, or they do let me know, because there's big demand for that. And I think that's quite interesting, because it's part of the challenge of the discussion. What does that actually mean? What does that mean for businesses and companies going forward? And I've done a little picture there of somebody smashing up a loom, and I like to wind my mum up, who's a terrible Luddite with technology. And I'll always talk about it. She tries to answer the phone. It's a bit of a disaster. She can't text me properly. She's always got her thumb on a picture when she's lovely, terrible with technology. So I always say to her, oh, you've been smashing up looms again, which is code for the fact she's a Luddite. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a piece here between, and this is a central part of the presentation, is the idea that it's not one or other. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of technology and a combination of the way we think and the way we do things. And I often hear this in the discussions that we have in our business. People will say, oh, well, you know, that's fine to say that. What we're trying to say is we need to combine things together, combine certain areas together so that we can actually get the best sort of performance, and not this sort of black and white view of it, this sort of, you know, it's very much a grey area. And I think this idea of trying to move forward when we talk about technology, we've got lots of things to consider. So certainly the things that came out of it when the discussion came about was, it was about tech, so innovating and adapting systems and requirements, which is absolutely true, because that's a central part of decarbonisation, definitely. And also the policy piece. But I think the overriding thing was the discussion of how to fit electric chargers. So I'm a bit concerned that that's what people think going forward, that actually decarbonisation skills are important. We've all got to be able to fit electric chargers. That worries me deeply about the future of what we're trying to do, because I think some of the things we've talked about today are in far more detail side of things. So on that theme, is that it? We've talked about some of these things. What are the biggest barriers to sustainable practice? A number of different areas here, but I think, again, back to the central point, technology has a vital part to play in this. Absolutely essential, has to be really key point. But some of the things we talked about to do with change. It's the change of the culture of the business to incorporate different ways of working. And that is time and time again comes up as one of the main barriers, stop points, etc., for moving things forward. And also back down into the idea of data. What data are we going to get? You know, we talked about data analysis. What's important, understanding the system or understanding what the data's actually telling you and what you can do with it, the purpose of analysis. But again, back to skills again, which we've already talked about. So I'll carry on with that theme. So challenge. Interesting quote here from it was published in the Chemical Engineer back sort of 18 months ago, or 2 years ago now. But it's talking about the fact that employers are thinking that they haven't got the skills in the business to be able to tackle decarbonisation, whatever we want to call it, in terms of the sustainability of it, haven't got the skills in the business. That's something that they recognise. And some of those skills cited included, as we've said, some innovative thinking, ability to adapt, etc. So there's this idea that actually there's the need for the tech, but the need for some more broader skills alongside that to support the change and the things we want to achieve. So when we think about it, if we talk about the skills and address these barriers, again, keep trying to re-emphasize it. We do need to understand the tech. We do need the engineering, the ability to understand what that means in terms of systems, but also hardware, etc., as to how we move that forward. And I think Emma's sort of masterclass on electronics. I've learned more about electronics today than I've probably done the last 20 years. So thank you for that. That's absolutely perfect. Although when you said disassemble, I kept thinking Johnny Five. Sorry about that. From yeah, disassemble. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I thought it was just me, but I'm pleased that. So that's good. That makes me feel good. That's brilliant, fantastic. So there's a broader range of skills beyond that thing. We talk about analysis and innovation. So we just mentioned it there. The ability to break down the information and assess its value. The idea of innovation to get better results. So we're broadening out away from just technology to other areas, other skills, in terms of trying to move that forward and trying to stick with the sustainability agenda. And when we talk about change, this idea that transformational change, again, we're changing the way the business does things. We're changing the way that the processes are made, the way people act and react, etc. And that's a significant challenge. And I think the overriding view is that if we just focus on technology, and I know this from my behavioural change work for the Department of Transport, we won't succeed. One of the biggest problems of the Department of Transport were companies were buying equipment and systems, fitting them, and then 6 months later they don't work. You can have the most fuel efficient lorry in the world, but if the driver can't drive it properly, it's not going to be fuel efficient. So it's a combination of the two, and that's the piece. There's lots of change to happen here, and that's the piece where, at the minute, are some of the barriers, as the Institute of Engineering and Technology suggested. And when we talked about resources, that's the heart of the efficiency piece. We've got to be looking at the resource piece to understand if we use less resource in the first place, that will be more sustainable. So ultimately, that is a key thing coming forward. So the last piece I'm going to talk about is this idea of greenwashing, and lots talked about this. But if we've got the ability to spot the good story and the accurate story from the one that's not, that's a key skill, first of all, before we get involved in anything, because we can go down a road of picking up an initiative and it might not necessarily work, but we need to look at that information and ask ourselves the questions as to whether that's something we actually want to get involved with. So number of skills, barriers, etc., and things to suggest to move that forward. So what we notice about these skills is it's a blend of technical and non-technical. Majority are actually non-technical from the list we've given, as I've alluded to. But then it's a question of, is this non-technical skills a thing? And it's a terrible term, non-technical skills. It doesn't sound very exciting, really. So I think that's a little bit up for debate in terms of what that means. So we'll sort of go into it in a little bit more detail. To me, it sounds a bit iffy. I'm not keen on it. I don't like it's a term. And this is something I've talked about previously. It's this idea of soft skills, because this is essentially what a lot of these skills are, but that includes behaviour. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, because behavioural aspects that we've talked about from CSR viewpoint, absolutely essential. But behaviour is not skills. And the things that we've already alluded to, a lot of that is based upon skills. So we get a bit lost in the terminology, which is where the idea of non-technical or soft skills can be confusing and takes us off the point back to the sort of skills that we want to look at. So if we talk about the application, so winning a grant bid, which I'm sure everyone in this room has been involved with to some extent, is put bluntly, a bit of a ball ache, it can be. So the ability to actually write the winning grant bid and connect with what the requirements are, understand the information, be able to communicate it, so the person reading the bid goes, yeah, they really understand that, I understand the proposal. That's an application of critical thinking. That's a skill, that's not behaviour. But that's the sort of skills that we need behind part of the sustainability drive, beyond just the technical piece. And this is a key point as well, but creativity, when we talk about the need for creativity, a lot of people talk about that in business. It's not just about design. We're not just looking for graphic designers, although they're great. It's the purpose of being able to think outside the box, to look in a different direction, to look at it from a different angle. That's what we want with the idea of creativity in business. We want people to think of things, different things. A lot of innovation comes from crazy ideas. That's what we want to encourage. That's what comes from creativity. So again, but it complements the technology, and that for me is a vital point. And sorry, last piece on this is, when we talk about these skills, this is where it gets difficult, because when we talk about human skills, people think that's about people skills, which are again important. But the idea of the sort of skills we talked about for sustainability, they are skills that are suited to humans, i.e. critical thinking, creativity. So they're not actually people skills, because they're not to do with people, they're to do with the skills that humans would naturally be good at, which is where we come to fundamental human skills. And that's what we use in our business to describe the skill bit of soft skills, certainly. And I think just back to the summary of this, and I've talked about this again before, it was the US Army introduced the idea as the skills which were beyond firing a gun. They recognised that their soldiers needed more skills than just the ability to fight. They introduced a whole system of skills about report writing, ability to spot information, critically assess information moving forward, and that became the basis of what soft skills became. So if we look at the two examples, they're critical thinking and lateral thinking. So critical thinking, the idea of finding value in disparate information. Back to greenwashing, That's an essential skill to be able to spot the good from the bad. And if you haven't got that, or it's not developed, then ultimately you're in danger of perhaps picking the wrong initiative. And the same with lateral thinking. We just talked about creativity. It's that idea of approaching things with a different angle. We need different solutions. We need different ways of thinking about things. That's really what underpins innovation. And again, that's the piece from the more sort of fundamental human skills, best suited to humans, as I've said. So here was a report from HMGov from 2011, Skills for a Green Economy. Again, you can see here are some of the skills that have been identified as being required. Point being is they complement technical skills. So we've got the engineering part thing, absolutely essential, but these are the skills that have been identified by HM government from research for the areas to support more sustainability. And again, a lot more to do back towards the idea of the soft skills or whatever you want to call that in terms of from a reference viewpoint. And just back it up with some evidence of that piece was the idea that the teachers struggling with that piece to see what does that mean, which is not great. If we talk about sustainability, it probably needs to be sustainable in the first place. So we can't get that bit right, we're going to struggle. And then we talk about this idea from the construction industry. And the key point's the last bit about the skill set. It's saying we can do so much, but there's another area there. And I guess my overriding theme is, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take that area? Why wouldn't you take that piece there to add to the ongoing piece? You've done a lot of the tech work. Why would you not take that last piece and add that in to actually get better results from what you're trying to achieve in terms of the sustainability strategy? So, transformational change. Basically, we need people to encourage people to be better at dealing with uncertainty and embracing change. Well, that's an essential part of any introduction to new tech. The barriers are often the people in the business. They don't like it. They're not keen on it. They don't feel comfortable. They don't understand it. So how do we encourage people to actually be more embracing of that change? And I say back to my behavioural change consultancy, and I know quite a few people who've gone on to run environmental consultancies, and they say this is the biggest challenge. The tech is actually sorting itself out. It's the adoption. That's a big problem. And again, innovation, we've talked about that piece there, but it's the idea of really trying to get into how do we fail, how do we play, how do we explore, where those ideas come from to support the technical side of things. So, I suppose the key point for me is it's the idea of it's not an either or. So it's technical and fundamental. They need to come together in order to achieve sustainability. It's why we talk about humans and sustainability. Back to my Luddite point, it's not about being against technology. It's about trying to look at what we've got, what do we need to do, what are the barriers, and how can we move it forward. So there's a whole area here of skills to try and move that forward and try to sort of achieve the objective we want to do. And I think also that part is that the fundamental human skills actually complement the technical. They're adding to it. So critical thinking is a vital part of trying to look at the innovation process or the technical design process. Absolutely vital to that piece. So a couple of examples, and I shall come to a conclusion. One of my big bugbears, electric vans, but this is an example. So we can look at the areas we look at from a technical, but we can see there's a clear difference. So, you know, a good question to you today is if all of the courier companies, large companies, have signed up to sustainable practices, why is it that we still get people delivering parcels in 15-year-old cars, driving like idiots around housing estates? Something's not right there. I haven't got an answer to it, but I don't know what's right. So is the policy being applied? Are they checking with the contractors? Who knows? Point being is there's lots can be done on driver behaviour, and that was part of the Department for Transport's work. It's a culture change piece about getting more out of the vehicle. What is the point of an electric van going 90 as opposed to a petrol van going 90? Absolutely pointless. So it's not either or. You can do the electric, but let's have a look at the driver behaviour as well. And that's key points there. So it's a combination of the two. And that's what I'm, I suppose, talking about today. So I'm ad-libbing a bit because I'm not an engineer or from a technical background, but just looking again at the points there. We can look at a factory and look at what we do for energy, but also we can look at how can we train people to be better spotting of efficiency opportunities to reduce waste, look beyond the obvious, ask questions, look at unconventional solutions. It's a combination of things. We can combine the two. There's more savings, more benefit to be had here. Just want to say on Six Sigma and Lean, they are tools, but they are not necessarily the skills behind doing that piece. It's the way of doing things, but they don't necessarily underpin the skills that support that going forward. I'm not criticising them at all. I'm just saying, again, we can look at some of the skills behind that and try and encourage that. So we have got a policy of looking beyond the obvious and really looking into detail. And then again, back to an office piece, we can do the recycling, we can do ethical sourcing, but actually we've got a culture change piece again. They've got to get people to buy into what's going on in the business. If we don't get that bit right, what was the point of it? We've done a great big initiative, it's been poorly communicated, no one's walked into it, no one's interested, but ultimately, and this is vital, we don't get the output from it. We don't get the output that we wanted. We could do better if we incorporated both technical and perhaps more sort of human-based skills. So, in conclusion, sustainability continues to be a major business challenge, but having the right skills in the business is a key differentiator, particularly in the marketplace. And I think many of those barriers cannot be solved by technology. Some can, some can't, because it's a blend of skills, and it's not either or. It is a balance. It is one or the other to ultimately to achieve the objectives that we're trying to from a sustainable practice. I'll just leave you on that little cartoon there. Give some thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We're now going to have a 15-minute break so everyone can grab another tea, a coffee, some cheese treats, and we'll see you back in about 2 minutes.
I forgot. I remind myself.
Rounding up.
Yeah, rounding up.
But it goes to
Ahead of the last few presentations that we've got, I will hand over straight to Richard, who will do a presentation for us, and then we'll go straight into our final session.
Oh, Lena, is this just, I'm pressing the button here. I knew this would happen.
Let's try again.
Oh, okay.
Good work. There we go.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So, I think I'll crack on. So, hope everyone enjoyed the first session. I mean, that really was. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sort of go through everything and talk about, you know, the collectivity and connectivity between everything that was talked about this morning. I think Sara really kind of encapsulated it at the beginning by saying it's about value of people. And I think the current theme that came through the other speakers throughout the session was the importance that people play in delivering a sustainable future for not only our organisations, but for the planet we live and work on as well. So this is about how we mobilise people, provide the skill sets and create that engagement for them. So I'm going to, you know, really talk about the complexity and the difficulty of navigating, you know, the sustainability landscape. It's become very complex. There's a lot of technology, a lot of terminology, a lot of jargon. People talk about ESG, people talk about Sustainable Development Goals, people talk about you know, sustainability in terms of environment and climate change, the race to net zero. There's all of these conversations going on, and these conversations are real. I mean, they're going to have an impact on our businesses, and if our businesses do not start to think about their sustainability strategies, then, you know, they're going to struggle in the future with things like retention, with things like recruitment, with things like tendering, like reputation. All of these things hinge upon the future value that an organisation can offer its stakeholders through building a sustainable future. So significant, so, you know, I'll talk about that sustainability strategy, the significant economic, environment and social impact of the organisation, and the information to do with CSR/ESG that sustainably influences the assessments and decisions of stakeholders. And if I just sort of come through a little bit to talk about what Emma talked about, good news. You know, this is one of the good news. It's about opportunity. Well, sustainability is about innovation. It creates transitional opportunities for our businesses to do something different, to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And part of that is accepting that change is happening, and we need to be part of the change plan. We need to, you know, what can we do? I've spoken before at the Sustainability Technology Cluster, and I've looked at the businesses within the automotive industries and seen how they're looking at battery power, how they're looking at hydrogen, how they're looking at, you know, materials and productivity in terms of creating a sustainable way of running their businesses. And this does have an impact on things like zero landfill, you know, and that cost to value, which is so important because, you know, there is a way of reducing our costs through bad sustainable practices and actually creating value and opportunities. Interestingly enough, one of my previous clients was the International Tin Research Institute, and they say there's more tin in landfill than there is in the earth. There's the same amount of tin on the planet there's always been, but there's more tin in landfill. In fact, there's an industry now where people are using landfill to extract golds and plastics and materials because a lot of it ends up in those places. So that's quite an interesting kind of, you know, look at, you know, where we're going. And so it's really about how do your businesses invest in the future in terms of what you do and how you operate your business and how you'll bring your people along with it. That sustainability definition is a holistic definition. It is about people, it is about profit, it is about planet. It is about a profit center for your businesses, done properly, measured, reported, and we can value and support the evidence to show the impact that we're making. And it's going to be driven by up and coming legislation and regulation. We already have the Green Claims Code introduced last year that will punish companies making claims about environmental work that they cannot substantiate. Just a few weeks ago, we had the zero single-use plastic legislation brought into the UK. So this might have an impact on our businesses. We need to be aware of this legislation coming in. And I was just mentioning this earlier, the Task Force for Climate Change Financial Non-Disclosure, that's already mandatory for companies to report if your organisation is turning over 500 million or employs over 500, and there are penalties for that. So there are drivers. But I think one of the drivers that Emma mentioned, and it's something that we come across time and time again, it's the next generation. It's our kids. And, you know, and we are seeing that you know, mum and dad, what are you doing about the planet? How are you going to build a legacy for us? How are we going to change the dial? So, you know, and this touches really back to what Aaron was saying. It starts with culture, it starts with people, it starts with our stories. You know, there's a guy from King of Shaves, I can't remember his name now, but he did a talk about his 18-year-old saying, Dad, you know, why are you killing the dolphins? You know, because all the stuff was single-use plastics. And he shut his business down and then remanufactured everything and refillable aluminium products so that he could become a company that was having a less detrimental impact. And actually his brand reputation shot through the roof because he remarketed himself and he made a big difference. And so, you know, he took the challenge. It was costly, but it paid off, and it's setting him up for a sustainable future. Because sustainability is about, you know, understanding that the future of business is going to be based on social value as well as financial value. It's about human capital and social capital and environmental capital, not just financial capital. And I think the quicker we start to realise that, the quicker we understand that value isn't just about money. You know, it's about society and the world that we live in as well. And what Aaron was saying, and it's very, very true, you know, he's absolutely right. The C in CSR is a nonsense. We've said that from the beginning, even though we are CSR accreditation, but we make it clear that the C stands for company, stands for charity, it stands for culture, it stands for community, it stands for climate, it stands for collaboration. All of us working together collectively to make a difference to change the world that we live in to the right. And we are making progress. Aaron has shown that in his talk. The progress may not be as far as we want it to be, but it's the state of play. We're on our way. Maybe we do take 2 steps forward to make 1 step back, but we are moving forward, and we always have to. You know, it's interesting that the first environmental legislation in the UK was in 1956 after the Great Smog. You know, yet the ancient Sumerians were talking about environmental tragedies back in the, the Neolithic sort of thing. So, you know, it may take a long time, but when we get there, we make a difference. Straws, we got rid of plastic straws just like that. The ozone layer, we sorted it out. And in fact, in 2020, the national electricity bill was reduced by over 20% in the previous 18 months because the UK transitioned towards LED. car showrooms, football stadiums, concert halls, factories. You know, it made a difference, not 0.2% or 2%, 20% reduction in the national electricity bill because of a transition to LED. So it makes a huge difference. So, you know, Aaron was talking about our stories, and Emma was talking about the legacy and also the opportunity that we have. And I think what John did is he kind of rolled that off and he said, yes, the thing is, it is about skills. It's about people again. It's not about the technology. The technology is there, but if we can't use it, how is it going to be of assistance to us? You know, that thing about electric vans is so pertinent. It's absolutely true. You know, I mean, it's such a low hanging fruit for, like, you know, London gas companies or whatever, or delivery companies to be using electric, because, you know, it's just going to cost them, save them so much money. But if you can't train people, so it's about skills. It's about training people to become CSR enablers. And in fact, it's about all of us, all of our jobs, part of our jobs being about sustainability. So it's not about a dedicated person within the organization. It's about all of us understanding that some of our job is about sustainability. Wherever you sit, if you're in accountancy or in HR or facilities, think about it. Think about how can we reduce our impact on the planet? How can we reduce our carbon footprint? The race to net zero, you know, we're going to have to look at, you know, what's called scope 3 reporting, when we look up and down the supply chain and ask people to report on their carbon footprint so we can report that as part of our scope 1 and scope 3 requirements for net zero. These things are some of the things we're going to have to do. So I think it's important to, you know, to think about mobilizing the individuals, the people in our business. This is a bottom-up approach. We care as people. We sit at home, we watch Seaspiracy, we see, you know, the blue planet, the plastics in the ocean. We are impacted by things like Me Too, by Black Lives Matter, these social issues, these environmental issues, these community issues. Look at what's happening today in Turkey. You know, 15,000, probably a low number compared to the amount of people and the amount of organizations that are already putting together community strategies to support that tragedy. So, you know, we do hear a lot of negativity on the planet around the world. We hear all the bad stuff. We don't hear the good stuff. And I think something that Aaron and John and I think Emma all touched on was storytelling. This is social responsibility. Sustainability is all about good storytelling. But you have to show the good story doing to make sure that that good storytelling is not box ticking, is not greenwashing, is validated and authentic. So we have a very simple framework, and this is the thing, to cut through this complexity, this sustainable landscape that seems that we just don't know where to start. We all have a sense that we want to do something, but where do we start? Well, if we just use those 4 pillars that Aaron alluded to, environment, workplace, community and philanthropy, and we break those pillars into some very easy sections. Under environment, we can look at energy, waste, supply chain, travel. We can look at community, recruitment, investment, groups and engagement. Workplace, things like diversity, mental health, education, governance, and under philanthropy, policies, volunteering, and so on and so forth. All of our businesses can use that simple framework, and it can do one simple thing: baseline. What are we doing now against those 4 pillars? You know, that's a very simple list. You know, we have some extensive lists that you can use to help you think, well, what are you doing now? And I tell you what, I bet you're all doing a lot more than you think you're doing. That's the thing, is that, you know, we are doing this stuff. When people talk about cost and investment and time and resources, we're doing this stuff already. So how do we start that journey or continue that journey and create some value out of it for our businesses? And how do we identify the individuals within our business who can be the enablers, who can have the skills to help drive that journey forward? So it is about building a culture with purpose. Something else that Aaron touched on, and I think this is absolutely true, is the culture within the business. There's got to be a culture that attracts people to come and work for that business. Gallup issued a poll called the State of the Workplace last year, and some of you may know the answer, so I won't ask, but it stated that in the UK, only 11% of the workforce are engaged in their jobs. 68% are not engaged and 21% are actively disengaged. And in fact, by building a culture within your organization that addresses our individual sense of purpose and reflects that, allows that to be part of our job, enriches our lives by building social value into our work, you can shift that 11% to 20%, maybe 25%. Think of the improvement in productivity if you change the dial of engagement within an organization. So use your environmental and social responsibility strategy to also address things like ESG compliance. So we've talked, everyone is probably aware of the environment, social and governance. These are some things that are not necessarily relevant to your business, but something to be aware of because it's there in the landscape. Prepare for the race to net zero. We've all got to think about what our business is going to do to address the race to net zero. We have a deadline of 2050. Build a culture that empowers employees to do environmental and social good. So provide the framework, the facility for your employees to do social and environmental good within your organization. And brings them on the journey. It creates that engagement. And also it attracts new talent. So back to that generational thing. You know, according to UK universities, students are now actively looking for businesses that are publicly making a declaration of their environmental and social responsibility before accepting a job. In fact, the chief exec of LinkedIn only said on Radio 4 in the last month with the head of Microsoft that the trend for millennials and Gen Z was that they are getting a job, only staying a month or two, and then changing their jobs until they find a place that has a culture that matches their sense of value and purpose. And they said above and beyond paycheck. You know, so we have a culture at the moment where we have more vacancies than we have more jobs. We have, you know, a talent pool that are looking for something very different that they want to work for. And, you know, Aaron's experience and the stuff we're doing with Haynes Watts really was about the fact that Haynes Watts as an organization said, what matters to us is giving something back. You know, that's what we need to do. That's what will bring us together. That's what will build that culture. And that will create that engagement and attract new talent. And of course, other little things. Well, when I say little things, they can be big. We had a law company at the beginning of last year that lost £2 million in failed tenders because they weren't able to show their environmental and social value in the tendering process. So tenders as well. And also good old brand reputation. My background's branding. We used to say your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Actually, that's about how other people talk about your business, how your staff talk about your business, how your supply chain, your customers, how everybody talks about your business. Today's branding is all about environmental and social responsibility. It's all about the sustainability of your business. So if you want to build on your reputation, you need to evidence and show that you are making a difference. So obviously the benefits to business is improved brand reputation. It's about business and industry reputation. It's customer and client engagement. It's showing that leadership, engaging with your supply chain, learning from them, or even providing learning for them. It's employee engagement and retention, improved mental health and well-being. The great thing about social responsibility and sustainability in that sense is it makes you feel good because it's about something good. It's a really good way to bring you in a positive state of mind. I've mentioned recruiting and attracting talent and operational cost savings, going back to that transition to LED, or even, you know, something that Emma was talking about in terms of, yes, there's a short-term cost to doing what, to transitioning to that kind of level of electronic circuitry, but the long term is an absolute saving for your business. It's an investment in the future, not a cost. That's the important thing. And of course, winning more tenders and attracting investment from the ESG, which is all about how the investment markets are rating companies based on their environment, social responsibility, will depend upon whether you're invested in. And that is about mitigating risk and also recognizing opportunities, so transitioning to a low carbon future. So if you want to talk to me later, you know, we are a global accreditation body. The accreditation actually is the process in which you start this all happening. You know, you can use the 4 pillars, you can use the framework. We have a toolkit on our website that's completely free that you can use to start measuring and looking at the things that you're doing and start to build a strategy. And we also deliver a self-paced, learn as you go CSR training course that explores all avenues of social responsibility and environmental responsibility as well, and how you put that strategy together and how you deliver that to create the engagement. And in fact, it's that very thing that creates the skills that members of your business can learn to become the sustainability ambassadors for your organizations. So that really, I really wanted to kind of pull that together and kind of reference, you know, what the speakers talked about this morning. And I'd like to now invite the speakers onto the stage, because I think there's a great opportunity now for us to perhaps, you know, ask questions and so on and so forth.
Brilliant. Yes, if we can get everyone to the front, I will very quickly readjust. There we go. Set up. Just a moment. Okay, and now we've got everyone.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, the panel will be happy to answer those questions on any of the topics that we've covered today. So, you know, if first of all, if there's any questions in the room, and we do have some pre-prepared questions, Pim, you.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested whenever I have these sort of conversations with people, they kind of appreciate the importance of it and they kind of get it, but the overriding factor is always going to be cost. And I'm kind of wondering, do any of you guys feel that there's going to be a tipping point where we start to move away from just looking at the cost and the cost savings and the price and all that sort of stuff, and we start actually putting more emphasis on the environmental stuff? Do we think that might ever happen? What's the panel's opinion?
I think what I was saying at the start, I think it's about the way we look at it to start off with. If you look at it as a cost and as a compliance thing, then you're setting yourself up to fail. I think there is plenty of opportunity. I'm not a big fan of the phrase quick wins, but there's plenty of opportunity to be seen in sustainability and value to be realised from sustainability by doing some very, as Richard said, we're already doing a lot of the things that are required. You'd be surprised about how many considerations you've already made, or what knowledge and skills you've already got in your business to be able to deliver on sustainability. But sustainability should be a benefit, a bit like, you know, the way we used to look at health and safety and risk assessments. Similar sort of thing, sort of, oh God, you know, health and safety gone mad. But it's everybody's responsibility. Another point that Richard made, it's not for the health and safety officer, it's not for the sustainability officer to bring the solution. It's for everybody to realise the value of sustainability in the business, for the business, but also for the community and the wider world.
Yeah, I agreed. And Aaron, do you have anything in terms of with what Haynes Watts are doing? Is
It's kind of interesting, because actually the topic of cost hasn't ever come up, actually. So it's kind of thought-provoking or question is, no one's ever talked about it. And I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One is, comes back to the personal story, because there is belief, and therefore we'll just push through this because we absolutely believe it. And number two, I think this isn't actually necessarily about incurring costs. If cost comes in, and I guess Emma might have different, because she's talking about manufacturing process, but we're actually in a service sector, so we're just talking about changing the way that we operate, and that doesn't necessarily initialize cost. It just creates a new way of working. It creates transformation and change. Maybe there's a bit of cost there, but it's not significant. So cost hasn't come up as a conversation point in Haynes Watts because of belief, and because it's actually more about just changing the way that we think and work.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, one of the key reasons for asking is that I'm aware of one member company who made a lot of changes in their business in order to save cost, and then coincidentally discovered that actually they are now completely carbon neutral, because all the changes they made happened to all be really green and really positive. But that wasn't the driving factor. The driving factor was the cost. And I'm kind of wondering if there's ever going to be a point where the driving force is not cost, but it's actually the green stuff. But kind of like the other way around, because it's kind of like, you know, they did all of that to save cost, and then we're like, oh crap, we're green, amazing. You know, I'm kind of wishing it could be the other way around, where they would do that to become green, and then go, oh my God, we saved a crap ton of money. You know, and I'm kind of wondering if that's ever going to be there.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think we are at that tipping point where belief is just put into one side the concept of cost.
Yeah.
Or at least.
Yeah, because you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and then if it saves you money,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the money follows. It's the old adage, you build the hockey pitch and people will come and play on it sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the thing
But we
is
say
that,
that all the time, you know,
yeah.
build it and they will come, and that's, you would hope that that's the case, but as you say, you know, from our perspective, it is a different discussion, because it is always about cost, you know, everybody that we're talking to, the implementation in some form or another comes at a cost. And it's such a paradigm shift, and I know I say that several times in the presentation, but it really is the whole process. You know, changing your mindset to how you approach the design phase, changing your mindset in terms of the additive processes in manufacturing, changing the mindset at the back end. You know, we were talking earlier on, weren't we, about you know, looking at how it shifts the way we approach we and the cost for we and the recyclers, getting the recyclers on board, and ultimately OEMs, larger OEMs, aren't interested in the recyclers anymore because they can implement this themselves. It's low investment, and you know, and it's a relatively easy process to do. So from a perspective of cost, I do think there will be a tipping point. I do think consumers and legislation will make it not about cost. People will have to do something about it. But for the moment, from the types of opportunities that we're talking about, it's almost always about cost.
I think if you've got some small steps is the key piece, because ultimately, again, this is about how much you can actually do. And if it's broken down into things that are achievable, it's about selling. I think the point everyone's raised, actually, which in particular, we've done a lot in terms of, and it's not about being complacent, but it's about looking back to saying, well, actually, that works. So let's take an example in commercial vehicles, the use of aero kit. Now, I'm so enough to remember back to the 80s when we didn't have aero kit, and look at the difference in vehicles now that's standard. No one would have a vehicle on the road without aero kit on it. It's a standard thing we do. It makes perfect sense. But I think the other point is also understanding what the implications of what someone's trying to achieve, because my point about the courier companies with all of the documents they've signed off and all the things they do, and the reality of delivery, something is not right there. So we've got to be careful we don't put the ladder on the wrong wall, and we think we're doing something, we're not doing it. So then it's back to what are we trying to achieve, and taking it back to simple things to be able to actually deliver, from my experience.
Yeah, and I think part of that is how you measure, record and report impact.
Yeah, having that baseline,
Yes,
as you said, Richard,
yeah.
really, you know, you can't measure anything unless you know that baseline.
Exactly, and if you get those KPIs in, so if you look at, you know, say Haynes Watt, for example, you may not see that financial value. It may not be driven by financial values initially, but it will follow, because the thing is, people will make decisions about who they want to work with and who they want to use. And if you put the KPIs in, you start to measure that, then over the years, you know, because this isn't you know, a one click and it's done. This is not a race. This is a journey, and this is about state of play. What's the current state of play? What's the state of play going to be like in 6 months' time, or a year's time, or 5 years' time? So we can, you know, be able to put the metrics in place to measure, you know, the investment that we make, and it might be a long-term investment with regards to what your organisation is doing, because that transition and that behaviour change takes time. But believe me, you know, that's going to be normal in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time.
One of the things the pandemic's been interesting is that people have understood their supply chains in more detail, and actually things are moving all over the place. I think Cosworth made that point. It said we don't know where things were. Things are moving all over the place, and people, why the hell are we doing that? We shouldn't be doing that. But no one's looking at it because it just turns up at the gate.
Yeah.
Or when it didn't turn up at the gate, people had to look at it and go,
yeah,
how does it work?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
I think as well, we've got to cost, it's really important. Any business to survive, a business needs to be able to change and evolve. Otherwise, a business isn't sustainable. So I think sustainability can actually function as inspiration and a spark to think, oh, how could we give ourselves an edge? How can we think about things differently? Yes, about all the different benefits and can be realised were so very important, we've all talked about, but actually think of it as an opportunity and an inspirational gift, if you like, for us to think about things in a different way. And I think it should aid businesses and humanity and nature rather than impede us.
I was taking that from, so you talked to, in fact, I think everyone talks about the fact that it's about capacity and what you're dealing with, filling plates, different jargon, different things that people are having to address. Now, you know, my background is in the smart manufacturing, the conversation around Industry 4. And actually, when I first got into it, it was about using resources more effectively, giving a better environment for the people that are working there, basically, you know, the same role as sustainability is. And yet it got taken over with a lot of what these guys do. Pinpoint micro measurements and IoT devices, and suddenly that's all that Industry 4 was, these things, and people are, I need to have someone who can do that, but I don't have necessarily the skills to do that, but not thought of in the grander context of everything. But actually sustainability is about better resource management, helping people make things better with less waste, being able to measure it, being able to track it, which you need the technology for. So how can here, you know, we've got now the digital manufacturing, the smart manufacturing SIG, and we've got this business agility SIG. We actually have the opportunity to bring these things together to signpost companies where the collaboration points are, where the similarities are. So they're not spinning a sustainability plate here and a smart manufacturing plate there and my human factors development here, but they actually can layer them up and say, these are the key factors at this point. Have the tech in place, have your goals of, are you trying to save costs, but how those costs also will save in sustainability. And those are the things that can come in, but it's going to take some smart collaborative working to signpost that.
I think part of that piece is that what I touched on, the idea that we've got, it's not a this or that, it's that combination. And often you talk to people and they're very much, you know, what it's that's it, that's what we're doing. That's not, as you just said. So we've got to almost take those barriers down and get people to understand actually working together with people who are, you might think is competitive, they're not a competitor, because it's all about trying to do the same thing.
Yeah,
yeah, I totally agree.
So I think what I was going to say is one of the challenges we get to is if you go, I'm doing the smart factories, I'm just going to stick another sensor on everything. I'm going to collect a huge amount of data on doing absolutely nothing with. You know, I was speaking to the guys at Rolls-Royce saying that the amount of data they're now collecting has become an issue on their bottom line because they're running so many servers and so much cloud systems to actually combine it all. And actually, so do you see that joined up thinking, or what can we do to create that better joined up thinking around sharing this?
I mean, from our perspective, sustainability is as much about stakeholder engagement as anything else. So it's if you know, John said, you reach out to your competitors, your supply chains, your internal and external staff, and you ask for their opinions and feedback, and you educate or learn depending where you sit. I think that's part of what it is. So you're not in a silo. You kind of are, you know, opening that up to a conversation that everybody needs to be part of.
I completely agree with that. I mean, one of the things that I'm a great fan of and we try to do in our business is it's almost like this big red emergency stop button. You know, you've got a problem and you press it and people come together and work together to identify how to overcome it. And the great beauty of that is we've got people in every single discipline in our business that looks at it. You know, there's no one type of view. It's an engineering problem. It's not just engineers that review it or R&D that review it. It's people on the shop floor. It's the guys that purchase the parts. It's, you know, it's a whole sense, I suppose, of the team coming together to look at what the challenges are and put their ideas together. And you know, I talked earlier on in my introduction actually about focus groups and how we encourage the people in our business to help shape our business and create that feeling of good company and culture. But it's the same thing. You know, I'm a big fan of getting everybody in a room and not necessarily post-it notes from a sustainability point of view, but the same kind of principle. Give everybody a pen and some post-it notes and literally just have a sticker session on what do we think we could do, you know, and you start to form it from there really. But if we don't work together, we're very, very blinkered about what affects our department and what does our department need. And we don't think about how that impacts everybody else. We don't look at the bigger picture as a result.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to take a quick. Do you want to?
I was just going to say, I think this is a law legislation going through about trying to remove some of the competitive barriers that stop this. So people like, for example, Weetabix and Kellogg's should be working together on transport because one's making the north, one's making the south. That's a genius to work out what we can do there. But they need to get past that sort of, for example, and this is a practical example. If I'm carrying Kellogg's products and I've got a Weetabix lorry and I'm late, there's a commercial conflict there straight away. Because someone could say, well, you're only late because you now failed the delivery. We haven't, and we look good in front of the customer. So you've got to get into those practical things which is where some of that competitive legislation I think hasn't helped at the minute.
Collaborative social responsibility.
Just to solidify what we're doing here today, I think that's part important as well. The fact that we're members of SPC, I think that's about collaboration, having the opportunity to talk here today, maybe we should have maybe from this, maybe we could have a bit of a workshop, a bit of a brainstorm session for people that want to talk about sustainability and have a bit of a workshop brainstorming ideas about how we work in our separate businesses and what's worked well, what hasn't. Maybe that's something that we can do to actually affect the question that you brought up, because I think that's a really valid question.
Absolutely, yes, good idea.
Very happy to help with that.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the session this morning. It's been really interesting. And my comment or question leads on to something John just said, and I ask this question now with a little bit of trepidation because I got quite ranty about it over coffee. I'm not going to share what our opinions were on it, but there was a say. Could the government be doing more?
Well, I mean,
well,
I mean, you have to caveat that. Yeah, I mean, I'll let the panel answer, but absolutely, of course, they should be. But unfortunately, you know, business is for the long term. I love the phrase that business thinks like an oak. You know, whereas governmental churn is quicker, and we have a government at the moment that's commissioned an oil-fired coal power station in Cumbria and refused to support battery factories in the rest of the country, and so it goes against it. You know, but you know, to the panel, so I jumped in there, but yeah, it makes me angry as well.
I'm actually not going to go on and say very much because it does make me extremely angry. I suppose if I was to put a little bit of potential light at the end of the tunnel, it's not very big, but yeah, I think is the announcement of the new departments, because as was said earlier on, you know, sustainability along with many other functions seems to just be crammed into roles that already exist with people that have no capacity, no ability to deal with it, and I think there is a potential that having a new department that focuses on, you know, technology and innovation and the opportunity to change may help there become more of a focus to promote what we can deliver from the UK. Go on. No, I value my job. I won't. Yeah, we're not doing enough. We don't do enough in this country to promote what we do in this country. You know, we want it to be great, and
We're very good at talking ourselves down.
as of yet, you know, it's very difficult to see that the government promote that we are.
I also think we've got the tabloid impact of that, because if you look at what the government's actually delivering, there are some extremely good things that they are delivering, and they're never going to be able to cover everything. And again, it comes down to what the objectives are, what they want to achieve. So there are things that they, you know, that move forward and work in the right sort of area. But ultimately, I guess the question is also, I suppose, put bluntly, if is it the government's job? If we talk about the fact that actually sustainability at the heart of it is about efficiency use of resources, one area, is it the government's job to regulate about companies using their resources efficiently? And that becomes.
But that then becomes a little bit dangerous, I think. And I think you need to. I think part of the problem is the knowledge and experience isn't in the government.
No, absolutely.
And it perhaps you could argue whether it should or shouldn't be.
Greek classics, certainly. It's not really wrong with Greek classics. That's fine.
But it's about, I think maybe we need to have a louder voice in industry, and maybe it's not just about government, it's also about media and how we're perceived. I mean, I used to scream and get so angry. I've been employed in industry, in food, in resin, in nuclear, in Northamptonshire. But I know I've got over 25 years experience. We've got so much stuff, but no, what we were told, no manufacturing. We don't do any manufacturing anymore. And it just drives me mad, but it drives that mindset. And I think a lot can be done, not just you know, complaining to the government, but also getting our voice out there, and changing the mindset of everybody. So,
I think we've got time for one more question. Lena, we're wrapping up around about now, shall we? Or... Okay, so yes, we'll have.
Thank you very much for today. It has been really thought-provoking. I think my sort of takeaway has been we've seen some really good best practice here today in either approach or company or style. And I think part of the challenge, particularly for the companies in STC, will be that potentially sustainability or the CSR strategy has been bundled into something for someone. And actually, I think in your examples, the culture of the business was set up in a way that individual personal passion around those subjects would enable change. And I think, you know, actually my takeaway from today is much more about leveraging the individual desire to make something different or better, but the company has to have a framework and a structure and a culture to say, oh, okay, you know, so-and-so's got a good idea, we'll implement that. It's not in their job title necessarily, but actually it's about that people power and the mindset and the behaviour, because actually if everyone starts cycling to the office or, you know, it becomes a social thing, or, you know, it's leveraging that kind of stuff. Because in my small world of this experience, there are still a lot of early adopters, and yes, the government legislation will come in, there'll be the shame, you know, your brand is not playing ball with this, and then that tipping point I think will come when there's a direct cost to bottom line. But in the kind of current day medium term, it's about letting individuals know that they can carry the sustainability championship, if you like, through their businesses, but the businesses need to have a support and a framework to say, okay, that is a good idea, or we need to consider that, or we can implement it, or so yeah, it was more of a comment than a question necessarily, but yeah.
It's very valid, because I think we are seeing, you know, from our perspective, we see a bottom-up approach, and that is, you know, if you mobilise that natural resource, which is, you know, the employees, the colleagues, the staff, who are passionate, and you provide the capacity for them to have a say and to then it's you know, it works, it does work. And you need you know, the top down bits, you need the chief exec to sign it off, you need the company board of directors, if there is one, or the shareholders, whatever, to support it. So it has to be up top down. But in terms of that contrast between, you know, I mean, I sit on the All Parties Parliamentary Group for ESG, and I know there are APPGs for net zero and hydrogen and all this stuff. So the government are doing a lot. The problem is we've had 12 secretaries for health in the last, 8 months, and so the people who run these departments, they're moving around, and there's no consistency. So it's a slow burn, but I actually think it's up to us, up to industry, up to business to lead. Is to, and in fact, if we're going to name and shame anything, we'll name and shame the government, the administrations for not doing enough, because we're on that page and we can mobilise it with us, people,
And particularly the next gen, they are much more critical of the brand of the businesses that they're being employed by. And, I don't know if you've heard of nudge theory, but it can be summed up in panic buying toilet rolls in a pandemic. If 30% of a group of people are doing the same thing in the same way, people are shamed almost into, oh, I need to join them. And actually, if your next gen are your 30%,
that's interesting you say about the next gen, because all of their ethics and principles, as soon as they got into that aisle, went out the window. So this is what be careful. Back to the delivery point. How much demand are you creating for products to come online for delivery? Before you look at who you work for, so you're also this personal bit. It's interesting, and I think that's fascinating to look at. How do we define what impact we actually make? Quite interesting.
Well, I think the point you made was about people from bottom up affecting that change.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important, but just to caveat to that, realise the value of those ideas in a structured, skilled way. Okay, so please don't go back to the ideas box. Please don't do that, because it give the people on the shop floor the opportunity to realise the value of their idea, rather than it being a moan and groan society, and because that's not going to solve it. It's actually about realising the value of the people with these ideas and helping them by improving their confidence and skill in communicating those ideas and what value that would add and what benefit that would bring.
Yeah, structure.
Structure.
One final
That
question
actually
then.
sort of leads on it. So I was interested in the structure you have where the sustainability ideas are potentially directly conflicting. You know, for example, the nudge of, yeah, we want to now go far more plant-based and everything else, but then we want to talk about food miles, you know, and working locally and using our local resources. You know, you completely throw your air miles out the window if you go all plant-based foods in your factory. So how do you manage those potential real, because it isn't 100% science, there isn't absolute clarity. If you do this, you're good for the planet. If you're going to do this, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the word I just come back to is transition. You know, this doesn't happen overnight, and what we see, you know, the plant-based food solution will be met. You know, you'll find more UK growers supporting that agenda, and less import and export, and you'll reduce those food miles. I think the thing is that we're all in a state of transition, and that's the human condition. I mean,
that's the flip side. So if you look at tomatoes, if you study on tomatoes, you grow tomatoes in a greenhouse versus outside. So there's an energy cost versus the transport cost. So therefore, the question is, if the overall energy cost is less on growing them in Spain and transporting them than it would be grown in a greenhouse in Ely, that's
absolutely. And I was at a climate change conference just at the end of last year, and there's a company that's now producing the very first hydrogen operated freighters. You know, so the thing is that and they're using seawater to make the hydrogen. So the thing is that you think, well, if you've got a freighter, you know, exporting food from New Zealand, for example, to England, but it's using, you know, it's zero energy, you know, because it's then you know, so but as I say, that's transition.
You take the tomatoes away from the tomato growers in Spain. What do you do about global
supporting a global economy? Yeah. So you know,
there's a cause and consequence of things, isn't there? But then that's part of knowledge and building up people's skill to be able to communicate and assess and analyse.
Well, that's the point of the greenwashing piece. It's trying to say, you know, buyer beware. Yeah. Approach it with ask, what is that? What does that make sense? Am I happy with that? And everyone go, oh, it's obvious. We're going to do it.
Yeah. Isn't that what awareness is exactly what we're talking about? It's being able to consider different scenarios and think about the causes and consequences, and then take the best course of action. As the HSC was saying, the most reasonably practical solution. reasonably practical. Okay. Very nice roll of the tongue, really easy.
So Sara, I think we can finish on that positive note. Really, it's about us being more aware of the impact of sustainability and the role it plays in our businesses and our lives, and how we can, you know, integrate that into what we do, and how we can be aware in terms of the greenwashing agenda as well, that we are being authentic and we're evidencing and supporting the impact that we're making. So thank you very much to our first back panel. Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you very much, Sara. Thank you very much, John, for being speakers today. And I hope you all enjoyed today's session.